Broken glass, Nikolai Volkov stood at the edge of his rooftop garden, 38 floors above Seattle's bustling streets. Rain misted the gleaming glass walls of his tech empire headquarters, Volkov Tech. At 42, he had everything money could buy. Yet the emptiness inside him expanded with each acquisition. "Mr. Volkov, the botanical consultant is here for the Living Wall project," his assistant's voice announced through the intercom. He straightened his custom suit jacket. "Send her up." When the elevator doors opened, Nikolai expected another polished corporate type. Instead, Dahlia Winters walked in with soil-stained fingernails, carrying a worn leather satchel. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her eyes, a clear amber, assessed the space clinically rather than with the usual awe his wealth inspired. "Your garden is dying," were her first words to him, not even a greeting. "Excuse me?" She gestured toward the carefully curated plants. "Improper light exposure. Insufficient drainage. You've selected species that compete rather than complement." She knelt beside a withering fern, gently touching its leaves. This one's suffering the most. Something about the tenderness in her touch made him pause instead of dismissing her. "You're suggesting I start over?" "I'm suggesting you listen to what the plants need, not what looks impressive in architectural digests." She stood, finally extending her hand. Dahlia Winters, botanical research specialist. Her handshake was firm, unpretentious. Nikolai Volkov. "I know who you are, Mr. Volkov. The question is whether you know what you want." No one spoke to him this way. It was refreshing. Over the next weeks, Dahlia transformed his sterile rooftop into something wild and alive. She worked with quiet focus, sometimes forgetting he was there as she communed with her plants. He found himself inventing reasons to check on the project's progress. "These indigenous species will attract native pollinators," she explained one evening as twilight painted the sky. "Even here, surrounded by glass and steel, we can create a functioning ecosystem." "We?" She smiled, the first real smile she'd given him. Figure of speech. "Though you've been surprisingly attentive for a client." "Perhaps I'm interested in more than just the plants," he said, surprising himself with his directness. A careful look crossed her face. "I've worked with enough wealthy men to know when they're shopping for decorative elements, Mr. Volkov. I'm not for sale." "That's not," he began, then stopped. "I apologize. I meant no disrespect." She nodded, but the warmth had retreated. "The Living Wall installation begins tomorrow. Your assistant has the details." As she gathered her things to leave, he asked, "Why plants? Of all the careers a mind like yours could pursue?" Dahlia paused, considering whether to answer. "Plants are honest. They don't pretend to be something they're not. They can't lie about what they need to survive." She looked directly at him. "In my experience, that makes them rather unique." After she left, Nikolai stood alone in the garden. For the first time in years, he felt seen and found wanting. The installation took 3 days. Nikolai arranged his schedule to be present, watching Dahlia direct her small team with quiet authority. Her hands moved with precision and care, creating beauty from chaos. On the final evening, he found her alone, adjusting the irrigation system. "Will you have dinner with me?" he asked. "To celebrate the project's completion." She studied him, her amber eyes unreadable. "Why?" "Because I'd like to know more about the woman who told a billionaire his garden was dying and expected him to thank her for it." Finally, she smiled again. "One dinner, a public place, and we talk about something other than your wealth or my plants." "Agreed," he said, feeling strangely victorious. That night, in a small Vietnamese restaurant of her choosing, Nikolai Volkov laughed for the first time in years, and somewhere beneath the carefully constructed fortress of his life, a hairline fracture appeared in the glass. Silent storms. 3 months after their first dinner, Nikolai found himself transformed by Dahlia's presence in his life. They met twice weekly, always at modest establishments she selected, where his wealth meant nothing. She showed him hidden gardens tucked between skyscrapers and taught him to identify native plants growing through sidewalk cracks. "Beauty finds a way," she told him, kneeling beside a purple wildflower pushing through concrete. even in the most hostile environments. Dahlia remained guarded about her past, but shared her passion freely. She led a research team at the Pacific Northwest Botanical Institute, developing sustainable agricultural systems for regions devastated by climate change. Her work took her to remote locations, yet she always returned to her modest apartment filled with rare specimens. Nikolai found himself captivated by her brilliant mind and uncompromising principles. She challenged him constantly, questioning Volkov Tech's environmental policies and labor practices. "Your company could do so much good," she argued during a rainy evening walk. "Instead of just accumulating more wealth." "Business isn't charity," he countered, though her words unsettled him. "No, but it could be ethical." Her amber eyes flashed. "You have more power to create change than most governments." That night, standing in the rain outside her apartment building, something shifted between them. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in her voice, or how the streetlight illuminated the droplets caught in her eyelashes. Without thinking, Nikolai leaned down and kissed her. He expected rejection. Instead, Dahlia pulled him closer, her kiss a revelation, passionate yet tender, like everything about her. "I've been fighting this," she whispered against his mouth. "You're everything I warned myself against." "And you're everything I never knew I needed," he answered truthfully. Their relationship intensified rapidly after that night. Nikolai found himself opening up about his childhood in post-Soviet Russia, the poverty he'd escaped, the ruthlessness required to build his fortune. She listened without judgment, offering neither pity nor absolution. "We're all shaped by our pasts," she said, tracing the scar on his shoulder one evening as they lay entwined in his penthouse. "But we choose our futures." For 6 weeks, Nikolai existed in a state of unprecedented happiness. The board noticed his changed demeanor, the new environmental initiatives he championed, his growing reluctance to pursue aggressive acquisitions that might harm smaller companies. Then came the Singapore deal, a government contract worth billions that would cement Volkov Tech's global dominance. The board was ecstatic, but the required predatory takeover of 3 smaller firms troubled Nikolai in ways it wouldn't have months earlier. The night before signing, Dahlia prepared dinner at his penthouse. He watched her move through his kitchen with easy grace, wondering how to tell her about his doubts. "Something's bothering you," she observed, her perception uncanny as always. He explained the situation, surprised by his own hesitation. "6 months ago, I wouldn't have questioned this. And now I hear your voice in my head," he admitted, asking if there's a better way. Her smile was worth more than any acquisition. That night, they made love with an intensity that left them both breathless, vulnerable. Afterward, Dahlia revealed her deepest wound, the environmental disaster that had claimed her parents' lives when she was 12, caused by corporate negligence. "That's why I do what I do," she whispered in the darkness, "to prevent other children from losing everything to corporate greed." Her trust humbled him. As she slept in his arms, Nikolai made a decision. He would restructure the Singapore deal, find a way to collaborate with the smaller firms rather than destroy them. But morning brought chaos. A confidential Volkov Tech document had leaked overnight, revealing proprietary technology. The stock plummeted. Emergency board meetings were called. Accusations flew. Through the crisis, one detail pierced Nikolai like shrapnel. The leak had come from his personal devices, accessed the previous evening. During the time Dahlia had been in his home, cold fury replaced his panic. He'd been played masterfully, seduced by a corporate spy. Her environmental crusade, her principles, her apparent distaste for wealth, all carefully crafted to appeal to him. He'd exposed his vulnerabilities, shared company secrets, all while she extracted information. When security footage confirmed Dahlia accessing his laptop while he showered, the betrayal crystallized into something hard and sharp within him. He didn't confront her. Instead, he disappeared from her life completely, blocked her number, instructed security never to admit her, had her consulting contract terminated. The Singapore deal proceeded as originally planned, more aggressive than ever. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at his office. Inside was a single seedling in a biodegradable pot with a note. Some things, once broken, can grow back stronger. He dropped it into the trash without hesitation. The garden on his roof withered within weeks. Nikolai didn't notice. He had returned to his former self, harder, colder, more isolated. The glass fortress around his heart had been rebuilt, with no hairline fractures to be found. Hidden roots. 6 months after Dahlia vanished from his life, Nikolai's empire began to crumble. It started with the Singapore project. The rushed implementation led to catastrophic system failures in critical infrastructure. Then came the whistleblower reports of unethical data harvesting. The EU imposed record-breaking fines. Class action lawsuits mounted. Volkov Tech's stock plummeted 70% in 3 months. Investors demanded Nikolai step down. The board forced him to sell his controlling interest. The empire he'd built over 20 years collapsed in less than 1. On a rainy Tuesday, Nikolai found himself clearing out his office, a stranger in the building that once bore his name. The new CEO, Harrington, watched from the doorway. "The severance package is generous," Harrington said, not unkindly. "More than fair, considering." Nikolai didn't respond. What remained of his fortune would sustain him comfortably for several lifetimes. Yet he felt hollowed out, purposeless. That evening, he wandered Seattle's streets in the rain, no destination in mind. Without the insulation of wealth and power, the city felt different, raw, more immediate. He passed a community center with a handwritten sign, "Urban Restoration Project, Volunteers Needed." Something compelled him inside. Perhaps the need to be useful, even momentarily. The lobby bustled with activity, people sorting seedlings, organizing tools, reviewing maps. No one recognized him without the bespoke suit and entourage. First time, a woman with silver-streaked braids handed him a clipboard. "I'm Josephine. We need help with the Rainier Valley site tomorrow." Nikolai signed up under his mother's maiden name, Petrov. For the first time in months, he slept without nightmares. The next morning, he joined 20 volunteers at an abandoned lot choked with debris and invasive species. Their task? Transform it into a community garden and natural habitat. "Nikolai, you're with Priya on soil testing," Josephine directed. Priya, a graduate student in environmental science, taught him to collect samples and test pH levels. The physical labor felt purifying. By day's end, his hands were blistered, but his mind clearer than it had been since before Dahlia. He returned the following day, and the next. The project became his anchor in a world suddenly without structure. 3 weeks later, Josephine approached him during lunch break. "The foundation funding this project is hosting a benefit tomorrow. We need volunteers to represent our work." "I'm not good with people," Nikolai demurred. "You're better than you think," she countered. "Besides, Priya's presenting our soil remediation results. She could use support." Reluctantly, he agreed. The venue was the Pacific Northwest Botanical Institute, a cruel irony not lost on him. The benefit was modest compared to the galas he once attended. Scientists, community organizers, and environmentalists mingled in the Institute's glass-domed conservatory. No one recognized the unshaven man in borrowed formal wear. During the presentations, Nikolai learned the foundation behind these restoration projects, Terra Nova, had transformed dozens of contaminated urban sites into productive ecosystems. Their methodologies were revolutionary, combining traditional indigenous knowledge with cutting-edge science. Our founder will share next. "Steps," the MC announced. Nikolai froze when Dahlia walked onto the small stage. She looked different, thinner, with new lines around her eyes, her chestnut hair cut shorter. But her presence still commanded attention. Her amber eyes still burned with quiet intensity. "Terra Nova began with a single question," she said. "How do we heal what seems beyond repair? Not just land, but communities damaged by corporate exploitation." Nikolai wanted to leave, but found himself rooted in place. "Our newest initiative focuses on areas affected by tech development," Dahlia continued. "Specifically communities displaced by Volkov Tech's expansion," murmurs rippled through the audience at the controversial. Name. We've secured funding to convert former Volkov Tech properties into community-owned spaces, she explained. The company's recent restructuring has made several sites available. Nikolai felt dizzy. She was systematically undoing his company's damage, the damage he'd refused to acknowledge. After the presentation, he hid in the conservatory's tropical section, processing this revelation. Dahlia wasn't a corporate spy. She was something far more dangerous, a woman with purpose. Mr. Petrov? Josephine found him. Priya needs help with the display table. At the table, surrounded by before and after photos of restoration sites, Nikolai noticed a familiar building in one image. Volkov Tech's former manufacturing facility in Detroit, now transformed into community gardens and affordable housing. This is remarkable work, he commented to Priya. Wait until you see the new project, she replied excitedly, pulling out blueprints. We're converting the old Volkov Tech campus in Portland. As she explained the details, Nikolai realized with growing disbelief that the design incorporated elements from Dahlia's original rooftop garden at his headquarters, the same indigenous species, the same water conservation system. She'd been planning this long before they met. The Portland project has personal significance for Dr. Winters, Priya explained. Her parents were researchers at a lab that was shut down when Volkov Tech acquired the property. There was a chemical spill during the transition. It wasn't handled properly. The revelation hit him like physical pain. The environmental disaster that claimed Dahlia's parents, it had been his company. His acquisition, his responsibility. As this truth settled into his bones, he looked up to find Dahlia standing across the room, her eyes locked on his. Recognition dawned on her face, followed by something unreadable. She didn't approach him. Instead, she turned and walked away, disappearing through a door marked "Research Only." Without thinking, Nikolai followed. Weathered Stones. The research wing of the Pacific Northwest Botanical Institute was a labyrinth of glass-walled laboratories and humid-growing chambers. Nikolai navigated the corridors, following glimpses of Dahlia's retreating figure. She moved with purpose, clearly expecting him to follow. Finally, she entered a large greenhouse filled with plants he recognized from endangered species lists. She stood with her back to him, adjusting the misting system. 6 years, she said without turning. 6 years of my life dedicated to undoing the damage your company caused. Nikolai remained silent. Understanding this was not his moment to speak. When I realized who you were during our consultation, I nearly walked away. She turned to face him, her expression carefully neutral. But then I saw an opportunity. To infiltrate Volkov Tech, he said, the bitterness he'd nursed for months surfacing. To change it from within. She gestured at their surroundings. To show the man behind it what his empire was destroying, hoping he might use his power differently. The implications staggered him. You never accessed my computer that night. No. Your security chief, Jensen, leaked those documents. He'd been selling company secrets for years. Her eyes held his steadily. I discovered the breach pattern during my systems review for the living wall installation. I was going to tell you that morning, but you'd already decided I was guilty. Shame washed over him. Jensen was arrested 3 months ago. I know. By then it was too late for us. She moved to a workbench, creating distance between them. Why are you here, Nikolai? Playing at being a volunteer under a false name? It's not a game, he said quietly. After Volkov Tech, I had nothing. The restoration work. It gave me purpose. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but recognition. Show me your hands, she said abruptly. Confused, he held them out. They were rough now, calloused from weeks of physical labor, soil embedded beneath his nails. She nodded slightly. Working hands. That's something, at least. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. The Portland project, he finally said. It was your parents. Pain flashed across her face. They were investigating sustainable alternatives to petrochemicals. After the acquisition, corners were cut during the lab shutdown. Safety protocols ignored. I never knew, he whispered, though the excuse sounded hollow even to him. Of course not. CEOs rarely inspect the casualties of their mergers. Her voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. My mother died instantly. My father lasted 3 weeks. I was 12, suddenly alone. Nikolai felt physically ill. Dahlia, Don't apologize, she cut him off. Actions matter more than words. What are you going to do now that you know? The question hung between them, weighty with expectation. Before he could answer, the greenhouse door opened. A tall man in a lab coat entered, stopping short at the sight of Nikolai. Everything okay, Dahlia? He asked, his protective stance making his relationship to her clear. It's fine, Rehan, she assured him. Dr. Rehan Kapoor, my research partner, she added for Nikolai's benefit. Rehan, this is Nikolai Volkov. Recognition dawned on the scientist's face. The Nikolai Volkov? Former CEO of Volkov Tech? The same, Nikolai acknowledged. An awkward tension filled the space. I should return to the benefit, Dahlia said. Rehan, could you show Mr. Volkov our Portland remediation models? He has a personal connection to the project. Without waiting for a response, she left them alone. Over the next hour, Rehan walked Nikolai through Terra Nova's work. The scientist was initially wary but warmed as he explained their methodology. The Portland site presented unique challenges. Decades of industrial contamination had leached into groundwater. Terra Nova had developed specialized mycoremediation techniques, using fungi to absorb toxins. Dahlia pioneered this approach, Rehan explained, his admiration evident. She identified fungal species with extraordinary bioremedial properties. She's been studying them since her undergraduate work. How long until the site is restored? Nikolai asked. With adequate funding? 5 years for basic remediation, a decade for full ecosystem recovery. And without adequate funding? Rehan's expression grew serious. We'll still do the work. It will just take longer. Dahlia won't abandon this project. It's personal for her. As they reviewed the financial projections, Nikolai understood the magnitude of Terra Nova's undertaking. Their current funding would barely cover preliminary work. When they returned to the benefit, Nikolai watched Dahlia from across the room. She moved with the same quiet confidence he remembered, but he now recognized the steel beneath her gentle exterior. She had transformed her greatest trauma into purpose, while he had allowed his setbacks to destroy him. As the evening concluded, Nikolai approached Josephine. I'd like to make an anonymous donation to the Portland project. The next morning, he arrived at the Rainier Valley site as usual. Dahlia was there, inspecting the previous day's plantings. Their eyes met briefly before she walked toward him. Josephine told me about the donation, she said without preamble. 40 million is an oddly specific amount. The exact profit Volkov Tech made from the Portland acquisition, he replied. Plus 20 years interest. She studied him, searching for something in his expression. Money doesn't erase the past, Nikolai. No, but it might help build a better future. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to be part of that work if you'll allow it. Not as a donor, as a laborer, a student. For the first time since their reunion, something like respect flickered in her amber eyes. The work is difficult, she warned. Healing takes longer than destruction. I have time, he said simply. She nodded once, a decision made. Report to the Portland site on Monday. We need all the hands we can get. As she walked away, Nikolai felt something shift within him. Not hope exactly, but possibility. Like a seedling pushing through concrete, finding its path to light. Wild Gardens. 2 years later, Nikolai knelt in Portland soil, carefully transplanting native seedlings alongside community volunteers. The former Volkov Tech campus was transformed. Manufacturing buildings repurposed into greenhouses, parking lots broken up to allow groundwater recharge. The executive office now Terra Nova's regional headquarters. Mr. V, is this spacing right? Asked Zoe, a local teenager participating in Terra Nova's youth internship program. Nikolai checked her work. Perfect. Remember what Dr. Winters says about root systems needing room to establish. I know, she grinned. You two sound exactly alike now. He smiled, recognizing the truth in her observation. 2 years of daily immersion in Dahlia's work had changed his fundamental understanding of systems, ecological, economic, social. The man who once viewed efficiency as paramount now appreciated the necessary messiness of regeneration. His life had simplified dramatically. He'd sold the penthouse, keeping only enough money for modest living and donating the rest to an independently managed trust for environmental restoration. He lived now in a small apartment near the Portland site, his possessions reduced to essentials. The transformation hadn't been easy. For months, volunteers and staff regarded him with suspicion, knowing his connection to the site's contamination. Dahlia maintained professional distance, supervising his work but revealing nothing of her personal feelings. The breakthrough came 6 months in, when winter storms threatened to flood newly planted areas. Nikolai worked 36 hours straight alongside Dahlia's team, constructing emergency drainage systems. In crisis, previous identities mattered less than present actions. Afterward, exhausted and mud-covered, he'd found Dahlia in the makeshift field office, examining damaged seedlings. "We saved most of them," he'd said, offering coffee from his thermos. She'd accepted with a tired smile. "You understand now, don't you? Why I couldn't just let it go?" "I understand that I was wrong," he'd admitted, about everything that mattered. That night marked a shift. Not reconciliation exactly, but recognition of shared purpose. Gradually, professional respect evolved into cautious friendship. They worked seamlessly together, their complementary skills creating an unexpected partnership. His organizational abilities and global connections accelerated Terra Nova's work, while her scientific brilliance and ethical vision gave it meaning. Now, as summer sunlight warmed the rejuvenated land, Nikolai watched Dahlia leading a group of visiting scientists through the mycoremediation zones. Her excitement was visible even from a distance as she showed them soil samples, proving the decreasing toxicity levels. "Earth to Nikolai," teased Josephine, now Portland's project manager. "The Community Center Planning Committee is meeting in 15 minutes. I'll be there," he promised, returning to his planting. Later that evening, he and Dahlia walked the perimeter of the site, their daily ritual to observe changes and plan the next day's work. "The university wants to establish a permanent research station here," she told him. "They're calling it the Winters Kapoor Center for Bioremediation." "Rehan must be pleased," Nikolai said. Her research partner had become a friend over the past 2 years, his initial wariness giving way to respect. "He's insufferable about it," she laughed, already planning expansion sites. They paused at the western edge of the property, where a memorial garden honored those harmed by the chemical spill, including Dahlia's parents. Wildflowers surrounded 2 weathered stone benches. "I received an interesting offer today," Nikolai said as they sat. "The Environmental Finance Initiative wants me to lead a fund helping tech companies transition to regenerative business models." She studied him. "Will you accept?" "Only if it doesn't take me away from this." He gestured at their surroundings. "From the work we're doing here." "The work will continue with or without you," she said, but her tone was gentle. "You've built something valuable, Nikolai. Your experience could help prevent other sites like this one." He considered her words. "What would you do?" "Since when does Nikolai Volkov need my permission to make decisions?" A smile played at her lips. "Since I learned that some perspectives are wiser than my own," he answered honestly. "Especially yours." Something shifted in her expression, a softening he'd glimpsed occasionally over the past 2 years, but had never presumed upon. "Take the position," she said. "But keep your hands in the soil sometimes. It's good for you." They sat in comfortable silence as sunset painted the sky in magnificent colors. "I never asked for your forgiveness," he said finally. "It seemed inadequate." "Forgiveness isn't something you ask for," she replied. "It's something you earn through changed behavior, and something I give when I'm ready." She turned to face him fully. "I forgave you a long time ago, Nikolai. I just wasn't ready to trust again." "And now?" he asked, hardly daring to breathe. Instead of answering, she reached for his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. Her touch was warm, certain. "Now I see a man who rebuilt himself from the ground up," she said quietly, "who learned to nurture rather than possess, who faced his worst mistakes and worked to repair them." Her amber eyes held his. "That man I could trust, perhaps even love." The word hung between them, delicate as a new shoot. Nikolai felt humbled by the journey that had brought them here, from his glass fortress to this wild garden. "I don't deserve you," he said truthfully. "Probably not," she agreed with a smile. "But these plants don't deserve this soil either after what was done to it. Yet they grow anyway, transforming poison into beauty." She squeezed his hand. "Nature doesn't concern itself with deserving, only with what's possible." As twilight deepened around them, Nikolai understood that their story wasn't about redemption or forgiveness, but transformation. Like the land they tended, they had changed each other in fundamental ways, creating something neither could have cultivated alone. "What's possible for us?" he asked softly. Dahlia's answer was to lean forward and kiss him, not with the passion of their past, but with the deeper connection of their present. A kiss rooted in shared purpose and hard-earned understanding. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "Something sustainable," she whispered. "Something that grows stronger with time." Around them, the restored land breathed with renewed life, proof that broken systems could heal, that damaged roots could find nourishment again. Their entwined hands, like everything in nature's wisdom, had found their way back to fertile ground.